I'm really glad I'm interviewing you because you've achieved a lot and you have you've achieved a lot and I'd love to talk to you about it because you're basically living the media dream and you're in market number 2, Chicago, so it's a big deal.
Well, that's kind of you to say. I don't often feel that way. I feel like I'm grinding it out like we always
Yeah.
do, and but that's awesome. I'm happy to share whatever.
Okay, so why do you think you're grinding it out? I mean, because
Well,
like from the
because
outside in, it looks, yeah.
because I still say yes to everything, and I have a bunch of jobs, and I don't intend on uh stopping that. Right? Like I think that we all have this dream when we do this that we're going to end up getting like the stable job that brings us to like the height of all media success, which is cool. But I love grinding, saying yes to almost every extra WGN hosting shift I can get because I just genuinely love that. And working for the Blackhawks and not giving up that gig because even though that's some long nights during the weekend and the weekend, because it's a blast. And TV here at WCIU where I work is an awesome opportunity to still tickle that part of my brain. And then working with Block Club, which is as a digital operation, the future perhaps of where our media world goes. I don't know. I feel like I am still grinding it and probably will until it's all over.
Well, what do you do for the Blackhawks?
So the Blackhawks, I'm their in-stadium host, in-arena host. So like picture the person that gets to play games with fans or interview players after the game, like on the Jumbotron. So I am like the hype man for the Blackhawks. I've been with the organization in some capacity for 13 seasons, and this will be my 5th season as the guy on the Jumbotron, which is such a fun job.
Wow. And I mean, so you're in the stadium when you do these things.
Yep, every home game, you'll see me there up on the Jumbotron before the games. I keep on calling it a Jumbotron. They're going to slap my wrist. It's a video board, excuse me.
Okay.
And so I do like pregame reports from different places in the building. It's kind of like I used to have the job over at WCIU here at the Jam where I was the morning show goofball, where I would just meet people on the streets and do fun stuff with them. It's basically that job, but through a hockey game.
Wow. And how do you like working in sports? Because a lot of people want to work in sports, want to work in broadcasting.
Right. And like, I'm a completely different animal than the broadcasting. I'm almost more the entertainment. I love sports. When I grew up in Chicago, I grew up in Downers Grove. And I loved going to Cubs games with my dad. I loved going to Hawks games with my dad at the old stadium or at the United Center. And like, I, of course, loved the sport aspect of it, the competition, but I loved absorbing the vibe at the stadium and like the feel. Like I went to, like Gene Hahn has been a public address announcer for many, many years. I wasn't a White Sox fan growing up, but I would still just love the fireworks and the voice and like feeling like what is the chemistry of making a crowd go crazy. So when I had the opportunity to like do this as like a side hustle, it's fun. There's like a science to like making 20,000 people. Obviously the most important thing is the team is good and they play well, right? Like I'm not trying to elevate myself there, but like in timeouts and intermissions and things that are normally a lull in the action, I like being a fan scientist.
And how do you get all this stuff? I mean, do you have any advice for people who are, because to me, you're living the dream because you're doing all these different things.
Well, so people ask me a lot about how you get these gigs, and the way I got a lot of them is I was just working part-time at all of them for a long time until they all continued to grow on their own. So like I graduated from University of Illinois back in 2006. And I spent my next 3 years at the University of Illinois working at the student radio station as the operations manager of WPGU, like the adult babysitter. I was like 21, 22 years old running a radio station, right? A college radio station, but getting a lot of experience there. I eventually realized I had to get out of Champaign as much as I love Champaign. I said, I'm never doing broadcasting again. And I moved out to DC to work in politics. And so I spent a year in the Senate. That's a whole other story. But then we all got voted out and I came home with nothing. I'm like, oh, I'll try broadcasting again. And I got a few little things. I started as a traffic producer over at Metro Networks or Total Traffic back in 2011. And that was like just a part-time, not even on air. It was part-time, just like getting Bart Shore the information he needs for his reports. Right. But I said yes to everything. At the time I was living at home with my parents at the age of 26, what every 26-year-old dreams of, just like, because I didn't have any money, right? And I was making what, $13 an hour as a traffic producer, maybe not even that much. So I started doing that. And then the Blackhawks, Gene Honda, who's the public address announcer, they needed a new backup. I happen to have known Gene just because he went to the same college radio station I did years and years and years before I did. But so, okay, they need a new backup. I auditioned and I got that. And then just kind of started saying yes to everything. And like, I got to eventually get on air and traffic reporting, then get a solid job, then start filling in on WGN radio as a traffic reporter, at BBM, like a lot of different places. The helicopters, I got to fill in for Chris Oppermill on Channel 2, right? So you just kind of like, and at Fox, we would do Fox 32, the morning show. We got to fill in there too. So you just start like, from age 26 to 30, it was just like an all-out assault of like, I'm making nothing, but this is what I've chosen. So go and do it. And I haven't lost a lot of that. They all just kind of have led to the next thing, which leads to the next thing. And I've just been very blessed to work with employers who are very chill about me kind of doing things in different places. So why I have all these jobs? They were a bunch of part-time jobs that grew and I've just kind of held on for dear life since.
Well, in terms of let's talk about journalism for a second, because this is for the INBA also, Illinois News Broadcasters Association. But so what have you done in journalism?
Well, I mean, I can start by, I started at a college newspaper. I started at the Daily Illini as a reporter, and at WPGU, the radio station, as a news reporter. And then I was the news director. So yes, that was when I was in my teens and early 20s. So not that much. But in terms of news reporting, when I was at Total Traffic, we had a news operation that I helped start up, where we would provide news and information to a bunch of different iHeart radio stations. So I was literally, for about 4 or 5 months overnight, one winter, I was churning out copy for Chicago radio stations, Mississippi. It was like the strangest beat I ever had, Arizona. But I was in charge of like, making calls, getting reports, getting, actualities, all that sort of stuff. And I would do it through the overnight hours or the evening hours so that all the morning jocks, these weren't for like news stations. They were mainly for like music stations, so that they'd have copy and that they'd have audio that they could use. So that was like 4 or 5 months of like grinding out, which was useful, right? Like writing, I don't know, like 80 radio stories in a night, just like hammering out copy was a good lesson. Where my journalism now is, like for WCIU at TV, I kind of helped produce this show called On the Block, which is a coordinated show with Block Club Chicago. So I produce a lot of the news that we do here, choose which stories we're going to talk about, how we tell these stories in the right way on TV. And then I host a segment called It's All Good, where I dive deeper into like a good news story that also is turned into a podcast on the Block Club side. So that angle. And then, yes, at WGN, I'm a host. I host 2 shows, a financial show, Your Money Matters, and a legal show called Let's Get Legal. Those wouldn't probably fall under the realm of what journalism is, but when I fill in for all the other hosts, whether it's Bob, John, Lisa, and news breaks, you kind of like take off a host hat and go back into journalism mode. I was in the studio when the Highland Park shooting happened, right? I was in on the 4th of July. And so at, 12:15 in the afternoon, what started as a show where I was going to talk about, barbecuing and the founding of the Declaration of Independence, you take off that hat, you put on the news hat. And then I ran a newsroom essentially with the great news team. I didn't do it by myself, but I hosted 8 hours of straight news. Right. So, it kind of like peeks its head in all the time in all my jobs, but, is the journalism aspects are narrowly focused in a few different positions.
How do you juggle all that? Because I've heard you in all aspects, all media. How do you juggle everything and how do you keep it straight?
From a scheduling standpoint, that's probably the hardest part, right? Like not double booking yourself in the same place at 2 times, or just bringing my laptop so I can do that, right? Like I've done Block Club podcasts here at TV and WGN. If I need to, I can, at the United, like, so my WGN show is often right before a Blackhawks game. And so when I'm at the United Center, I do the game from the basement, or do the show, from the basement. But in terms of like juggling it from a doing it standpoint, like, right, the mind that that aspect, the mental aspect, I don't know. I don't know. I think it comes from like grown up as I think so many of us did, I would watch Peter Jennings every single night. I listened to Bob Collins every single morning on GN. I lived and breathed talk radio, television news, and every aspect of it. So I think there's a lot of people in this business that can go from talking about a Highland Park shooting and then be funny an hour later or the next day, or pivot to a game, or then, go play a game on a video board. So I don't have a great answer for that. I guess I was lucky enough to have parents who literally gave me a video camera when I was young, like one of the old ones with the VHS tapes that you went in, not anything fancy. And just like, I pretended to be a reporter. And I'm sure that like, it wasn't good. I know it wasn't good, but like to do that at 4 years old instead of 24 is probably an advantage.
Yeah. Well, you also have a very natural ability, because it seems like, well, what I like about you is that you like people, because I like people who like people. And
Thank you.
And because some people are very successful, but you can tell they don't like people, or they're in the media, but they're into the storytelling, but they're not necessarily into the people part. But have you always been like that? Into people?
Yeah. Yes. I'm a people pleaser to the nth degree. When someone doesn't like something I did, I take it way too much to heart. But just generally, I like to be, and it's actually another, like when college kids ask me like, oh, what do you want to, how do you get to do all these things? Be someone that other people want to work with, right? Like we're not all going to be on every single day and the most friendly people in the world. That's never going to happen. But like, just be a genuinely good coworker, approach people with issues that you have to them and be polite and courteous. I guess I probably should thank my parents for that sort of stuff too. But like, we're also like in this business, underpaid, overworked, probably, I think would be a characterization, right? But we all have a passion for it. So like, I love working with people who care and who like give a care, right? So I think that goes well. I don't know if I answered your question, but just be a nice person. That usually helps, I think.
But also there are people, I mean, not to name any names, but there are people who work in media who are not nice to work with, that people should be aware, people should be aware of that. So how do you deal
maybe I'll turn into that one day.
How do you deal with those people? Like, I've never worked in TV, but I mean, does TV have
the team I work with, and I'm not just saying this because I work for them now, there's no egos in them. Our host is Brandon Pope, who is a stellar guy. And the producers are great. I think we've all worked with people that you just like deal with. I don't know. Like, there's also people, and I'm sure you've dealt with too, that tell you to get out of the business. Like, this sucks, get out of it. You're never going to make it. And those people you really have to like not bring home with you, because then you start to like question all that stuff. So, when you deal with someone who's either too arrogant for them, or like, I definitely will not name names, but when I was traffic producing or when I was doing that and I did something wrong or wasn't up to snuff, like I took it as a motivation. Like, I did not get downtrodden and then like tuck my tail between my legs and go home. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to show them. So I guess I have some of them to thank for learning that discipline, while also remembering that like now that I get to host things, that I would never treat a producer. I mean, and the workplace has changed considerably in the last 10 or 15 years, but like, I'm not someone that would like yell at a producer in any unconstructive way or in any way. I'm all about like constructive learning, and like, so I don't know, when you deal with a-holes, you just try not to absorb it deep inside your skin. Just try and let it go, especially when you go home.
Yeah.
Because that's like when I pull into my house, like, although I do some work from home, it's like, that's the end of that.
Yeah. And also you mentioned, working with certain people, and you said there are people who've told you negative things. How have you dealt with that? I mean, did you actually hear negative things?
Oh, yeah. Or like I've gotten feedback, right, from every job, and I'm as defensive as the next journalist or broadcaster. And I really do try and find, like, with every piece of like negative thing or like comments or like, and also like, we get it as hosts on the text line. Like, I can see what the listeners think in real time. Of course, those skew more negative, right? Of course, we get a lot of great positive feedback too from listeners, but I try and find like a nugget of truth, even if I think it's all BS, or a nugget of something to do better the next time. You know, actually, the thing that I got the most when I started hosting at GN was that I talked too fast. And because I'm a very energetic person, and but I got it consistently. And like that was something where I was like, I'm going to make a conscious effort instead of telling or thinking that the listener's wrong, to okay, if enough people have said it, it is time to figure out a way to make that work a little bit better. So I don't know. It's like sorting out the bad critiques or the people that just want to be you, and sorting that out from people that like are legitimately trying to give you feedback. And then I always come up with a defensive front at first, but then I try and like really, whether it's on that drive home or something, go, okay, was there a nugget in truth in there that you just didn't like to hear? Because you know it's true too. And I think that's helped.
Now, what's some good advice that you have gotten in the media for the media?
Well, I mean, I got a lot of the say yes to everything when I worked at WPGU, the college radio station, as a student and then as a professional, because we would like bring alums down, right? Like Charlie Meyerson would come down a lot and give great advice. He used to be news director at WGN and then Rivet Radio for a while. And now he does XRT, Chicago Tribune, all that stuff. He's got a great resume. And he would always, talk about the need of, saying yes to things and doing things correctly. And there's a way to do it. Like Gene Honda is like one of my mentors as a public, address announcer for many sports teams. That he was the same way. I mean, he says yes to everything. Dude does the Maui Invitational in Hawaii, flies home, and then next morning he's getting ready for a Blackhawks game. And then sometimes he does a White Sox game in the afternoon and he is of an age where a lot of people don't do that anymore, right? Where they just are maybe slowing down. Gene Honda will never, and he says yes to everything he can. So I think that even without like someone sitting me down and saying those things, you sort of like see what has worked for the many great people that kind of went before you in that business.
And also another thing is, can you just break down what you do for Block Club Chicago? I mean, you do these stories, do them every week, or what's going on with that?
So we have a podcast that started out. So Block Club Chicago, for people that don't know, digital news site, focusing on local news at the neighborhood level. They just covered the city. They are the result of where I used to work, DNA Info, which was a for-profit news operation, both in Chicago and New York, run by the Ricketts family, run by Joe Ricketts. That site had shut down. By then I had already moved on. But when they launched Block Club Chicago as a nonprofit newsroom 5 years ago, they did a lot of it over like crowdfunding, right? And one of their promises they made was that they'd have a podcast. They didn't quite figure out how it was, but we had always talked about, John, we'll bring you on to launch this podcast at some point. So in 2021, in the spring, we launched the It's All Good Block Club Chicago podcast. We did 100 episodes over the last 2 years or so that are just, some of them are stories that the reporters wrote, and I interviewed the reporters and the source and merged together into a pretty little story. Sometimes it's just nonprofit groups that I see, but we did 100 episodes of exclusively only good news. And just recently, we're still going to keep doing the good news stories, but we've added onto the podcast now to also dive into deeper neighborhood stories. We just did a story on Monday, released a podcast. I thought it was excellent. You can listen to it at wherever you listen to your podcast. Just type in Block Club Chicago, about why the Beverly neighborhood on the South Side systematically destroyed their basketball courts in the 90s. And you can probably all guess why. There's a lot of racial undertones to what happened in that story. But now the neighborhood has changed a lot, and people are trying to bring back some of the basketball courts, and they're meeting some familiar resistance, maybe not quite as vocally said as they were back in the day. Anyways, that's a long example for what we do. Is I try and turn their stories into a good audio accompaniment to the story.
Nice. And you do that every week?
Every week. And sometimes we do 2 or 3 a week. So it just kind of depends. So we always, for the most part, doing It's All Good stories, that the good news to start your weekend on a Friday. And then throughout the week, like we had that story on Monday, I kind of follow the reporters in the news. Like I'm intimately involved in the editor's room. I know what stories are coming in. I know what the revisions look like. I can see the stories. And our goal is when the story gets posted, it also has a podcast with it that day to maximize visibility for the story. And then this carries over into TV, is we put on a weekly news magazine style show here at WCIU that airs Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And but it's the same episode. It repeats. And so like, while I'm also producing the podcast, I'm also working with the reporters on how to tell it via TV as well. So it's an interesting like combination of two of my employers into one or two unique roles. Does that make any sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I mean, it's multimedia. It's the 21st century. You're doing basically what people should be doing is multimedia. And by the way, Brandon Pope, he spoke at the INBA conference last year. So
yeah, he's great.
Okay, but how do you like doing TV? What's it like?
So I did a daily TV show for 5.5 years, 6 years. And it's a grind. It was a morning show. So it was like a wake up, and my sympathies to any show that starts at 4:30 like they do, or 4 like they do on Channel 9 or 32 or 4:30 on the others, because they're up at like 1 a.m. We started at 6. We were a 6 to 9 show when I started, then 6 to 8 after that for a bit. So we were waking up at 3, which isn't as bad as some of the other people have it. I'll just say that. But it was a grind. I got that job because the executive producer of You and Me This Morning, which was the old show with Melissa Foreman and Gene Sparrow, two amazing humans. They needed someone to do their Facebook page and like pop in once a show being like, leave us a comment. Here's what people are saying. And I took the job. That part didn't excite me, but the idea of like getting on TV was another example of like, I'll make this something else eventually. Just get me in the door. So I started doing that. And then the very first week I was there, the features reporter, Chris DeRose, he was out on Friday and they wanted someone to cover the start of Winter Wonderfest at Navy Pier. And I had never, it's great visual. But I had never done like live TV reporting. I didn't know, but I like had done it in front of the camera at home, or I've done enough stuff. So I was like, can I do this, please? Can I try it? And they're like, sure. And then slowly but surely, I became kind of the feature reporter. And then when they canceled that show and started a show called The Jam, they said, we're going to have you do those reports still. You're going to be kind of the feature fun reporter on the streets, but you also have to be our weatherman because we don't have a meteorologist. Wow. So we need you to do 8 weather hits a show in addition to what you're doing, and try and involve like the people in the streets into your weather reports. So that was super fun. That would be like, I'd play games with people on the street. I'd do random things with people heading into work, commuters. I would do the Navy Pier stuff, but always with an eye on like, well, how do we also tell the weather in the middle of these? So there came to a point where I was getting like 12 or 13 or 14 hits a show for 2 hours. So that may seem like nothing to people. That's a lot of moving around and like doing different things. And I loved it. That was probably the most fun I've ever had at TV, but it was a real grind. I didn't have a producer either, so I'd have to kind of come up with the segments, and it became stressful because like we would do some great fun stuff, and then it'd be like, all right, it's like a baseball and daily TV. Great game. What are you doing tomorrow? Right. Or if you had a bad day. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's just like, oh my God, daily TV was so hard. I eventually then hosted The Jam, and then the pandemic hit, like 2 months into me becoming a host, which is something I'd always wanted to do, like host a TV show. And of course, the pandemic hits. They send us all home. We do the show from home valiantly. They moved us to the afternoons, evenings. But after a year of doing that, and credit to Weigel Broadcasting for keeping an entire TV show employed during a horrific pandemic, that the first 6 months of we were never on television, we were only on Facebook Live, and they still paid for all of us to stay. We'll never be more thankful for a company really sticking their guns out for us to keep us employed for a year. In April 2021, unfortunately, they were like, we have to cancel the show. We can't keep operating like this. I still did some freelance work for them. And then shortly after, they were like, let's launch this on this Block Club Chicago show. So I was brought back pretty quickly. But what is TV like? Daily TV is really hard. It is a tiring, exhausting grind. Doing a news magazine show where we have a week to put together a cool show, you still feel that stress and that rush, but it's just a little bit more relaxed pace. I don't think I could do daily TV and daily radio and Blackhawks and podcasting. So I think I'm in a really great spot now with a weekly show.
How do you do live reporting on TV? How did you know how to do that? Well, first of all, you did it without experience.
Yes.
But then how do you do it?
Well, I mean, obviously reporting news stories is a little different than maybe feature reporting, but it takes a lot more preparation than people realize, right? Like it's only a 1.5-minute report they toss to me, right? Okay. Well, let's just use Navy Piers Winter Wonderfest. All right. So, light story, what's going on? What are the new things? You and your photographer really need to map out, where are you walking? What are you showing? I'm going to talk to you this way, but you get a lot of people on camera with you that don't have camera experience. So you want them to like kind of know what you're going to go, where you're going to say, where you're going to map out. Maybe some graphics are going to come up on the screen. I can't see those out in the field. We don't have a monitor out there. I just have a little guy in my ear saying, we're on the graphic now, or toss back to studio, or one more question, or stretch, which is my favorite thing in the world that everyone else hates. When they're told to stretch, that's where I eat, because I just love being able to fill time for people to help put out a fire back at the studio or something.
Well, how do you stretch? What's a good way to stretch?
By pull from the well of knowledge you've acquired over the years. And I do always think, like, when I would be out in the field, I'd be like, all right, how long do you want this to be? A minute, 90, 2 minutes, 2.5, whatever it is. And then I would always put somewhere in the back of my head, if they ask for more, here's another angle I could go with. And that, I think, goes into the preparation. Like, my reports would always, I feel like, seem spontaneous to the listener or to the viewer, because they'd be kind of fun and energetic. And when you are given the gift, and I do call it a gift, where something F's up, right, I would not try and cover for that. I would recognize, and this comes from probably from my improv training that I used to do back in the day, to recognize when things go wrong, that is when everything is right.
Nice.
To use the gift of a mistake or something happening that you didn't expect, or someone coming into your shot, or like something like that. Use that gift, that moment, to make a moment on television with that. So anyways, what I was saying is, it may come off as it looks kind of frantic and not super prepared. And that's by design, because I was often very prepared for every hit, which is kind of like, I think, a good lesson in general. Like, be prepared, but still make sure you're casual enough to keep it relaxed and feel right to the listener or the viewer, but then be ready for anything.
Well, how did you prepare? How do you prepare in general, that you're saying this? I mean, you're telling people to prepare.
I think it depends. You're right. I think it depends on what the gig is, but, and this is the same for Blackhawks. I think people might be surprised to find out that I prepare for all the games and stuff that we do, but it's literally about just mapping in your head out what this segment is supposed to be, how you think it might go, what are the potential tripwires that are going to happen along the way. Because anything can happen in live entertainment or live broadcasting or whatever. So if it's an interview I'm doing for one of my shows live on GN, I have a couple questions I've got like in my mind. I've got a backup in case the phone line goes out. I always have like a story that's related to the topic ready to go on my computer screen in case a call goes out. But it's also, and this is like the biggest thing for people that interview other people, have a few questions and a general idea where you want to go, but do not stop listening to what the person is telling you. They are going to give you the nuggets, and they're going to give you the idea of where to go next. I think a listener can tell immediately when you've just like got these pre-prepared questions that you're just going to roll through. Listen to what people are saying and respond to what they're saying in kind. So how do I prepare? I learn a lot about a subject. I try and know enough that if that person drops off the line, I could talk for the next 5 minutes and cover till we have to hit the news break. But put it all in a file and then focus on the person you're talking to. And then if you need it there, you can just double click on it and then it will open up. Did that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just wondering also, how do you prepare for a live TV hit? You're saying that, things happened and.
Yeah. Well, I think you talk to the person you're talking to or the people you're talking to. You tell them roughly what you might be asking them. You tell them where to look. You tell them how to be nervous. You literally, especially if it's a segment where you're just trying to have them have fun or whatever it is, or be energetic, you try and relax them, right? Like being on, you turn that light on, you could talk to someone and they seem totally fine. And that light goes on and they know you're live, and it can be a disaster. So I would always ask my videographer, turn on the light. This is going to be bright at 6:20 in the morning.
Right.
Feel what this is like. Here's how close I'm going to put this microphone to your mouth so that I don't surprise you with it in 2 minutes when we go live. I'm also then at this point going to go over here and go talk to this person, but do not wander away. So it's a little bit of like choreography, but I also like, people would always want me to do like a Kimmel sort of segment where I like play gotcha with a commuter, and I hate doing that. I hate the awkwardness. My goal, whether it's Blackhawks, live TV, live radio, I always want that person to feel like the star in their moment, because I get to be on TV or radio every day. I want this person to feel like they had like a special experience, and that smile that they have, or that comfort, or that fun, translates so well to listeners and viewers, I feel like, or fans at the United Center, that I'm not about to not prepare them for what's about to happen. We do games at the United Center where we have them sing karaoke, like the most embarrassing thing you could do, but I do not want them to be embarrassed. So, it's about sitting down, getting them comfortable. Here's what's going to happen. You can look at me. You're going to have the scoreboard over here. Don't look at yourself. Let's talk a little bit about like this, and just getting them relaxed into that moment so they feel comfortable. And same thing on like serious topics. Like if I always do pre-interviews usually with radio guests, if it's going to be anything that's a little bit difficult, I want them to kind of have an idea of the sorts of questions I'm going to ask while still keeping it fresh. So it's a lot of talking to the person you're about to talk to. I think that just makes sense to them, to make them feel comfortable with the experience, because we want them to have a great experience, because then the listener, the viewer is going to love it. And yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea that you can prep people you talk to spontaneously. How much time are you taking to prep these people?
Well, oftentimes, like if I were setting up for a live hit in the field and we were doing, I did so many games. I should send my reel over at some point. I would sometimes only have like a minute or two, or 30 or 45 seconds. It's about like looking to them in the eye one-on-one. I'd be like, here's what's about to happen. We're going to do this. This is going to be great. And this happens at the Blackhawks game too. You don't have too much time to prep, maybe a minute or two. Just going through those motions. I mean, sometimes you might have a little more time if it takes a little longer to come to you, which can actually be worse, because this happens in TV or in live entertainment or in radio, whatever. They're expecting to go on in 2 minutes, and all of a sudden now it's 12 because the game keeps going. They don't get a whistle. TV, there's breaking news. They don't come to us. Like, that's actually way worse, because then you have to keep them occupied, not let the nervousness start to like billow. Like there's almost like a real sweet spot for it.
It also makes me think about, those TV segments that you say where that get, they have these gotcha moments. It's also that you're actually the host and you're interviewing these people, so it'll look bad on you.
100%.
Where these other TV people, the host is back in New York and they're making their millions and they're sending out their minions out there.
True.
And those
Yes.
people, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like that vibe. I always feel embarrassed watching some of those, and I feel like, God, I don't want someone to walk away from this like, oh, that was a terrible experience, But
this confirms what I said, that you actually like people. I mean, not that I don't even know you. I think I just met you like 6 months ago, or 5 months ago when I walked up to you. But yeah,
I do love people. I do love people. When I got to host TV or radio, or be it sporting arena, I have a co-host at the Blackhawks. Her name's Jenna Rose. She does great. She's much more in the sports broadcasting world. So there's chances to interview players, I'm like, go do that. I want to be with the fans, the everyday folks. I've always felt that way in TV. Like, I do not care to sit in a studio and interview X, Y, or Z. Unless it's someone that starred on the West Wing, because that's what I want. But I'd rather be out with the people in like engaging and like everyday folks, just like me, having a blast doing what we're doing.
Now, do you ever come across people who are not so gracious towards you, or they're sort of difficult and you think, this is not going to work out?
Oh, like for random people on the streets, or like, oh God, yes. I can usually tell right away. Like when you're trying to get people to talk to you randomly at a Hawks game on a video board or during TV, there's sort of like a look. You make eye contact with someone and you can tell when they don't want to be on, so you just let them go. There's some people that are just so curious about it that they'll come up, but when you're starting to talk to them, you can tell that they're either too nervous or they're not happy about it, and they're wondering, and then you just let them go. So I became a pretty good reader of getting people that actually wanted to engage and play in the game or the event or whatever we were doing. But like, it's live, so you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you never know who's going to swear either. So
that's true. Now, another thing is, you mentioned improv. What did you learn from improv that you've applied?
So I was in a comedy groups in college. And then when I moved back here, like I mentioned, I was cobbling together a bunch of part-time jobs. So I took classes at IO for a couple of years.
Which is IO, which is
Improv Olympic, which is long form improv. It's not like, what was the show that was always on that was so good?
Second City.
No, well, the whose line is it anyways? That is like short form, like make a quick joke. IO, for those that don't know, is behind the principle of yes, and you build longer scenes with people and you accept. First of all, it's a scary thing. I also did stand-up, which is even scarier, but like you come to the idea of like you're comfortable, number one, just filling time and like making things happen and not being nervous about that. Not letting silence drive you crazy, although in radio a second of silence drives us crazy. But I learned, I think, the art of, through those things, the art of when things go wrong, that's actually can be a lot more fun. Like, yes, part of my jobs are journalism, and when I wear that hat, like that's the most important thing. When I'm doing Blackhawks games or having fun, it's a whole different thing. It's entertainment, and it's also where was I going with that? The idea that when things go wrong, we're in the moment making business. That's what I like to say. Obviously, those moments in the journalism side are moments of like profound truth, right? You're trying to get to truth. When I put on the hat of entertaining, I'm in the moments making business where I want people who saw it to remember that for a long, long time. They remember that. And the things that happen where memories are actually made are when something magical happens or some train wreck happens, and you navigate through that and you make it work the best you can. I cannot stand when I watch news stations and the wrong graphic comes up, and instead of being like, oh my God, just acknowledge it and move on. People saw it, and like Channel 9 does a great job of that, right? Like their morning show plays with that stuff. And I think that's why it works. That's why everyone loves WGN TV, right?
Yeah.
Like they have fun with it. They still present you important information when they need it. Like they're never short on giving you the news. And they have a whole team that does it and does it well. But when it comes down to riding the F-ups, to say it politely, I guess, no one does it better.
Now, first of all, I love the WGN morning show is incredible. That TV show is probably one of the best in America, I'd say.
Yeah, probably.
But
sure.
what does yes and mean? I've heard other people talk about that.
So that means that your partner in an improv scene or someone else in an improv scene comes at you with some character or an idea. If you were to say no, like if they were to say, hey, can I help you with your homework? Or if they're just trying to establish a scene and you were like, no, first of all, that shuts the scene down already. And if you're like, no, come to this baseball game with me instead, that means that you had in your head where you were going with that scene, as opposed to, can you help me with your homework? Absolutely. And I noticed that you're holding your high school diploma in your hand right now. What are you trying to say to me? So like, you're trying to like add element. Yes is like accepting the gift that you got and then adding something on top of it to start to develop two characters. So now by saying that, I've basically made this other person a know-it-all who's trying to show off that they're smarter than me while trying to help me with their homework. Now we have conflict. That was like a really bad, not funny example, Margaret, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And another thing is, what do you think is the common thread throughout everything you're doing? Because you're doing digital, you're doing podcasting, you're doing radio, and you're doing TV. Have I missed? Oh, and you're doing the live sports thing.
Yeah. People ask that, like they're like, what's your brand? Which I don't have one.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I didn't think about that. Yeah, what's your brand?
Yes.
That's very
I don't
cool.
know. I think a big part of me is the brand of good news. Like I like showing off people that do good things and putting a positive spin on it. That's like half my brand. And the other half, I don't know, like, because like financial and legal stories aren't necessarily like all good news, but I guess part of my brand is I am a lot like a lot of our listeners and viewers. Grew up in the area, went to sports games, care about my future, care about my finances. I'm interested in politics, but I don't want to be overwhelmed by it. And I feel like in what I do, I'm lucky to kind of play that role of as an ambassador, as someone, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but just like connecting those important things in our lives and presenting them in unique or interesting or fun ways, just to, be like a fly on the wall in every room they go in.
Okay. And then I know you have to go in like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, around there.
Okay. Because you're so busy. I'm surprised I was able to schedule this with you.
Hey, it worked out. Only took us I only had to reschedule it once for a
That's
little
true.
half hour. So there we go.
But what are some things that you've learned throughout the years? Okay, so you did hit upon various aspects,
Yeah.
but are some things that stand out? Like, how long have you been in the business, media business?
So I guess technically I've been in Chicago since 2011 in this media business. I did it as an amateur in college and stuff before then, but so let's say 12 or 13 years, which isn't all that much, but
Well, you've
it
done a
feels
lot
like
within
it.
12 or 13 years.
Yeah, well, I think that's because it's always a grind. Embrace the grind is what I tell people. Say yes to things.
The
And
hustle
also I
never
will
ends.
say the hustle never ends, but also I feel like you can say yes to opportunities. You can say yes to shifts that you maybe don't want to do, but you do it anyways to become that reliable person. And with that reliability and with that, I can count on you sort of vibe, use that capital to then make sure your bosses know what your ultimate goals are. So I said yes to every traffic reporting shift and producing shift, but my bosses knew that I wanted to be on air doing more. I didn't want to be just doing traffic. I didn't want to do that. And I would keep them abreast of that in polite and productive ways. When I was working at DNA Info and we were doing, podcasting at DNA Info back when podcasting was starting, we had all this great audio, all these great stories. I used my relationships that I had forged at WGN radio to say, why don't we do a DNA Info segment twice a day for 30 seconds? I'll send over a recorded thing. You get some extra local news in there. Cool. Did that. When they launched the Wintrust Business Lunch and Steve Bertrand hosted it on the weekends, I suggested to WGN, why don't we do a segment called Openings and Closings, where I come on and tell you about the businesses that are open or closing, like finding windows to insert yourself in politely that you've gotten not by just asking out of the blue, but because you've devoted years to showing them that you could be a productive part of the team. And so then, like, one of the best things I ever did was just having been on WGN as like a news host, traffic host, I just went to Stephanie Tishner, who now is at LS as the GM. And I said, I want to host. I know that I'm not ready for it. What could I do to eventually get there? And she had me ride sidecar on a couple shows and then gave me a 2 to 5 a.m. shift. It's actually like, I think it's the 8-year anniversary today or tomorrow of that, overnight, Saturday to Sunday. The Cubs were in the NLCS, and as a huge Cubs fan, that meant that I couldn't go out and have fun that night. I had to get ready for a radio show. But then, like, pouring myself into those 3 hours, doing it well, and then saying yes to the next one, which was overnight, and next one, which was overnight, to like years and years doing. No one heard me on hosting WGN radio except a lot of truckers overnight hours, until eventually starting to get more opportunities. And now Mary Boyle giving me opportunities to fill in on the Bob Sriracho and John Williams and Lisa Dent. And then eventually getting a weekend show. Let's Get Legal. That's Saturday. Okay, it's 2 hours. Yes, my Saturdays are now messed up. I don't care. Here was my in. And then now Your Money Matters, right? Like, so it's about gaining the capital through hard work and being someone people want to work with, but then utilizing it in respectful ways that show that you want to grow.
I feel so excited. I've got to update my website right now.
There you go.
So before you, in a few minutes, anything else you'd like to say?
I don't know. I love what I get to do. I think it's really cool. I think that a lot of people tell you in journalism school to pick a lane. And I'm definitely someone who is, no, I'm like the Kennedy, so many lanes, like you can't choose, right? Like I get, I shouldn't say it like this, but I get bored with the same thing after about 3.5 hours. So I'm very lucky to have jobs where I can pivot around and within each of those jobs do different things and cool things. It's a unique career. I don't like when people say they want to do all these things. It's like, I was almost blessed that when I came to back to Chicago, I had to live with my parents for 6 months, so I didn't have to pay rent. So I was able to do that. That's not something that's afforded to a lot of people. And I recognize the privilege that comes with that. So I could just take like part-time gigs, but like I was almost blessed not to come home. I don't, this probably people won't even remember this. CBS 2 had an audition for a traffic reporter, and I was like one of the finalists for that. And I didn't get the job. And a really nice guy, Derek, got it. And he's a killer guy. Awesome. I was so sad. It was like May of 2011. I'd only been home for like 4 or 5 months. And here I got a chance to be on the CBS 2 morning show. And they were so nice and grateful. And it just didn't work out. It was maybe the best thing that ever happened to me, only because I got to then do a bunch of different things and grow a career in a different way. I have no doubt that if I had gotten that gig, and they were kind enough to bring me back when Derek was off, but like maybe I could have grown that into something else, and I hope I would have. And like maybe it would have been a whole different career in a different world in TV. Maybe it's CBS still. I don't know, whatever. Point is, though, I've gotten to do so many cool things because I didn't get that job. And there's been other jobs I did not get. People ask, like, how have you got to do all these things? I'm like, because I've gotten rejected from so many more. Like, I think we all have that. Like the yeses are way less frequent than the nos, even for someone that has 4 jobs. So using all those and as opportunities to get onto the next thing. So I don't know. Good luck, everybody.
Okay, well,
And I'm not quitting any of my jobs. So stop asking, can I fill in for you when you leave your Blackhawks job? I'm never leaving.
Right. Yeah, no, or so maybe some of us can append ourselves to what you're doing. But okay, well, thanks, and enjoy your time, whatever you're doing at WCIU.
Yep, I got some TV stuff to do. I'm about to interview a pest person about why the rat situation is so bad in Chicago. And I don't really know. The city's going to donate, or not donate. The city's going to allocate $1.5 million more in their budget next year to fight rats. And I got to figure out why.
I guess you'll find out. Okay.
We'll see.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Bye, Margaret. Take
Thanks,
care.